I am Kristan Viella. I am the acting director here at the Museum of Indian Arts and Culture and also the director over at the Museum of International Folk Art. Very happy to see you all this afternoon, but we'll start with the land acknowledgement. We wish to acknowledge that the Museum of Indian Arts and Culture sits on unceded ancestral Tewa land, now present-day Santa Fe. So that was also written by our former deputy director, Dr. Matthew Martinez. So just before we begin, I'd like to thank everyone who was involved in making this happen, this exhibition. I know Lilia is going to thank as well, but particularly the installation team, as well as the graphics and painting, as well as the collectors who most graciously lent their objects for this wonderful exhibition. Also thanks to our Museum of Mexico Foundation partners. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Lilia McInerney, who is the curator of this exhibition, and she will introduce Virgil Ortiz.
Thank you, Kristan, and thank you everybody for being here this afternoon. I know it's a beautiful day, so I appreciate everybody taking the time to be indoors. Thank you all for being here for MIAC's first in-person event since before the pandemic. I know we were all accustomed to MIAC events taking place via Zoom, so I'm so excited to see actual people on the other side of these talks and to have all of your attention today for what I'm sure will be a really wonderful conversation with Virgil. So as Kristan said, my name is Lilia McInerney, and I'm an assistant curator here at MIAC. And before we get started, I really wanted to begin by thanking my colleagues at the museum, Tony Chavarria, Nancy Allen, Autumn Leach, Amy Flowers, Paul Singh-Dawson, and Lisa Mendoza for their support in the development of this exhibition. And a huge thank you to the exhibition's lenders, Frank and Barbara Flock, Robert Gallegos, and Daniel Crane. This project would not have been possible without your support and generosity. And finally, a huge thank you to both Virgil and Tisha Goyo for being such inspiring and generative collaborators on this project. Working with both of you has been an absolute joy, to say the very least. It's hard to introduce Virgil, but I'm going to do my best. Combining art, decor, fashion, video, and film, Virgil Ortiz is at the forefront of the contemporary Native arts movement. And with a vision that merges apocalyptic themes and sci-fi with storytelling, his ingenuity as a contemporary artist, activist, futurist, and preservationist is shown through all facets of his creativity, all of which is grounded in traditional Cochiti pottery designs. Ortiz's works have been exhibited in museums around the world, and although he works within various mediums, Ortiz is first and foremost a potter. He says, "Clay is the core of all of my creations. My work centers on preserving traditional Cochiti culture and art forms. It is important to recognize that public communities are very much alive and have a level of vitality that speak to generations of strength, persistence, brilliance, and thriving energy." So with that, Virgil, can you come and join me?
Thank you, Lilia, Kristan, and everybody here at the MIAC. Everybody, thanks for coming today. But I got to take a video of you guys first to show my family, to have proof that everyone came. Thanks. Okay, thank you again for coming. This is so exciting for me, and I don't know what else to say, but when he had first called me about this award, I had asked him if it was okay if I could talk to and make it not about me. What I'm doing is way bigger than I am, and I wanted to just talk about a lot of different subjects and raise all the other artists that are coming up and all of us in general, living and loving together, helping one another, paying it forward to each of us, and just want to say thank you for all of this. And I guess I can give you a short background of what I do, why I do it, and let's see, I have a list of the images that I put together for you guys. I was born in a family of potters on my mother's side, Severino Ortiz. Our dad, Guadalupe Ortiz, was a drum maker. So I'm the youngest of 6 kids. All my siblings, my cousins, all of us were always would work with clay on a daily basis, and I had no idea that it was like art that was being created, just because it was around us every day. Our mom would be working on our kitchen table. That was her studio, and it was just pretty cool to have that. And she never forced it on any one of us, but she always would encourage us to touch it and, you know, just like learn all the different places where we gather all the materials and just the basic the methods and materials that we use, and make sure that we carry it on, because it is a dying art form using these traditional methods and materials, meaning that we all go dig our own clay, we make our own paints. Everything is natural from the earth. We pit fire with cow manure, aspen, and cedar wood. And we would go to gather all the materials different times of the years, like for the paint. I have a video that will show you guys that I kind of tied it all together. So this whole process to gather everything together takes a whole year. And to use the traditional methods and materials, you have to wait till the wild spinach plant blooms its purple flowers, and that's kind of an alarm clock to go pick it. So right now we're waiting on that. I'll be calling on my whole family to go gather it again. And that's like a really tedious project. I mean, when you see it in the video, you have to pick only the leaves. So we get a big batch that we share throughout my family. We usually get like about 8 33-gallon sized bags full of just the leaves only. Take it back home, boil it for 5 days. It starts to disintegrate. What we do is we're after just the juice. So we have to strain that, take it out, and continue boiling that water. So once it comes down from like really huge pots of boiling water to like about half a gallon of liquid, which is already starting to condense and get really caramelized, then at a certain point, then I could take it indoors and start boiling it down for another 3 days. So at a certain point, you have to watch that when it's really, you can't burn it, because like after about 2 weeks of boiling it, if you burn it, it will not stick to the paint and the natural clay. So you have wasted like 2 weeks of gathering the clay. And my nieces and nephews are pissed off at me. But it's just funny. I can't stress to you guys like how much work goes into working with traditional methods and materials. And I will share a story with you. I don't know if Robert Gallegos is here, but he was a collector that out of Albuquerque, and he had known it was a dying art form. So he would come on buying trips to each of the families at the Pueblos to pick up some work for his shop. And he had known me since I was like 6 years old. So I was raised like learning what was to what I would make like the storyteller, which is traditional at that point in Cochiti, and also making traditional pots like this one on the screen, like using the earth elements, the wild spinach, the clouds, kiva steps, lightning, rain, all of that mixed onto geometrical designs onto the pot. But I had seen my first first Star Wars movie when it came out when I was around 6 or 7, and that was burned in my head just because. Just of the sci-fi and the storytelling, that was all in it. And I had learned every single character, where they came from, what kind of ships they drove, and I was like, okay, this stuck with me a lot. So I started experimenting as a kid when I started really making, instead of making the seated storyteller doll, I started making standing figures, started incorporating kind of fashion and creating characters. And Bob Gallegos had asked my parents, like, who's teaching this kid how to do this different type of sculpting and the subject matter? And like my parents were saying, like, he's just experimenting. So they had supported me 100%. And at that point, we had never been to his studio in Albuquerque, and he had asked if they could bring me down to there. So we all went down, and by that point, I was probably 16 years old. Went down to his studio, and when we went in, our mouths hit the ground. My parents and I was like, our eyes were this big, right? Because it turned out he had the largest collection of historic Cochiti figurative Pueblo pottery from the 1800s, and my pieces that I was experimenting on looked exactly like them without seeing them, right? So my parents yanked me out of the room and said, remember this day, we didn't teach you any of this stuff that you're doing, like experimenting on, like, but it's the clay talking to you and through you. So just remember this day. And at that point, we went back in, and Bob had mentioned that we could use his resources and study them anytime we wanted to, and go look at the pieces, how they're painted. He would explain as much as he could about what they meant. And then it goes back to, that's like my first point in life. I had dedicated my life that I knew I was going to try to continue and revive the pieces from the historic times, which were all based on social commentary. So when the railroads were being laid around here in the 1800s, it brought more people to the area, more tourists, and with that, they brought more entertainment, right? So like shows started popping up, like the operas or circuses, and with the circuses, the sideshow characters, you would see all like the painted bodies or the conjoined twins or all the, like what back in the day, you guys, not that you guys lived back then, but but like you would see the old school circus sideshows like painted on big canvas banners, right? And like you would have to pay extra money to go see the half snake, half human or stuff like that. So our people were basically documenting, making a timeline of all the people that are coming into the area. So at a certain point, the Victorian attitudes realized that they were being caricatures made of them. But what they were really doing was just doing a timeline and recording everything that went down using clay. So they had told the people to stop making them, and that practice died out. So when this happened to me when I was like 16, realizing that, that's when I said, okay, I have to revive these pieces, and like somehow, like I don't know if it was ancestral memory or just growing up with it. I had no idea, because nobody at the time were making this type of pottery to really comment on hot topics or whatever was going on today. So I started traveling when I was in high school, taking some friends, and I would go to different places, got into the underground clubs that let us in, and from there we would see different types of club dancers or just club goers. So I started incorporating and telling stories about all these different types of people that we've seen in the clubs. So it fell right in line no matter what the timeline was, but I was doing exactly what our ancestors were doing, is capturing moments in time, making a timeline. But the only thing that has changed, because I was still using the traditional methods and materials, but I was able to, the only thing that had changed was just time. So that explains like all the different types of works that you see when I do use my traditional work, which is all the heart and soul, everything I do. I work in different mediums, but it's just out of necessity, like learning how to do Photoshop, video, film, jewelry, fashion, all that. But it helps me tell the story, and the story that I'm telling is the story of our history, 1680 Pueblo Revolt. Most people don't know about what it is, and like when I do exhibitions across, say in Paris or Prague or Amsterdam, all the Europeans know exactly what I'm talking about, the subject matter, but when I do it here in the metro cities in New York or LA, they have no clue. So it's kind of embarrassing that Europeans know our history more than we do. And even when I do shows here in Santa Fe, where most of it took place, they still don't know. So, and that's just because it's not taught in our schools, it's not in our history books. It's been swept under the carpet because of the genocide that happened. It's America's first revolution, but they don't call it because of the bloodshed and genocide, So what I feel I'm here on this earth to do is to educate the world globally using artwork about the Pueblo Revolt, and also to make sure that the know-how to create and make sure that the traditional works of Cochiti Pueblo stay alive. And from then on, then it spreads around to other pueblos, and we try to help each other the same way, using the old school methods and materials. And it's really hard for even like some of the people at my age that our parents were masters and are dying out. They know how to do it, where to get all the materials and all, but it's they all have jobs off the Pueblo, and kids, of course, so it's really hard to dedicate the amount of time it needs to really carry on that tradition. So what I'm here to do is trying to really inspire the next generation to talk about whatever you want to talk about. The door is wide open, but to really create a storyline which happened for the Pueblo Revolt back in 1680, telling the story in two different time dimensions in 2180, so that happening simultaneously, so that it allows me to create a very sci-fi storyline, part of my storytelling, and create cool characters, so that it might really get the attention of the next generation. So meanwhile, they're all looking at the fashion and the costuming and all the characters and everything, but slowly they realize they're getting a history and lesson. So it's kind of working out, and very happy about that. But yeah, so that explains all of like the aliens and all the different types of sci-fi characters, but it goes exactly back to the 1800s of how our people did social commentary. So now you know I'm not crazy, maybe. So we could go to the first slide. It was a picture of our family, our mom and dad. Our mom passed in 2007, our dad in 2015. Some of my family members that are still actively making using traditional methods and materials, Kyle, DJ, Harlan, Lisa, myself, our dad, we're so happy to get a picture with them like this. Our niece, Dominique, our sisters, Joyce and Janice. Next one. A sample of still pictures of all the different types of materials that we do use. We go to different parts of the Pueblo to gather the clay. When the clay comes out of the ground, I want to explain this before when you're watching the videos because it takes a whole year to process all of our materials using digging everything from the earth. So when we go gather the clay as a family, we have to feed and ask permission once we get to the clay vein and introduce ourselves, state our purpose, ask permission to dig into our Earth Mother, right? And to gather the clay. We only take as much as we need, but it takes a whole day to get it because you have to hike like 30 minutes up to the area and then back down, and by that time everybody's wiped out. So it comes out of the earth very moist. It looks like dark chocolate, and it's super dense. It's very pure, and we have to dry that out a whole year because if you try to work with it, even if you soak it and try to sift it, there's still parts of the clay that is so dense and pure that it doesn't release itself. And when you try to work with that, it's way too slippery, very, very pure, and it will most likely get cracks when it's drying or explosions during the firing. So we have to get those pieces back to our barn, let it dry for throughout the whole year, and then crack it up into 1/4-inch pieces and slowly rehydrate it, adding water. And then we let that soak for 5 days. As soon as that's done, we have to go to another spot in Cochiti and to get the temper, which is pumice stone or volcanic ash. Get that. That comes out really pure as well. It comes out really white in chunks. We take that back home to process it. I just throw on my combat boots, do a dance, a disco dance. But I just put a piece of canvas on the ground and stamp on it, and it breaks down pretty much very fine. But then we have to put it through 2 sifts, and it comes out like baby powder, very, very fine. So when you have those 2 materials ready to go, then the whole clay ball is ready to mix. Mix the clay, then we start sculpting. Everything that we do, we coil and scrape method, and the walls are about a little over 1/4-inch, and it has to be really thin because all the walls have to kind of match because of the expansion. And when you're firing it, it's like a 4-hour firing. So that's very fast when you fire pottery, but the amount that it expands and contracts, it has to pretty much have all the same size walls with no air bubbles, so that allows it to expand and contract. We fire it with above ground. It's called pit firing, but it's not in the ground. It's above ground, maybe 8 inches on a steel grate. We fire all our pots upside down, our figures standing up, one at a time. And at that point, when you sculpt it, you have to sand it, making sure there's no cracks. And then our clay is red, so when you sand it, the whole thing is red. Sand it down, take a light coating of water, remove all the dust, and then stick it in the oven if it fits in your oven. If it doesn't, then you have to build a fire outside to heat it up. Because once it's heated up, we have to put like up to 10 coatings of the bentonite clay, white clay. You'll see the sample again in the video, and you put it on hot, it adheres better to the piece, starts to evaporate and stick to it and fills in more of the porousness of it. Repeat it till it completely turns white. It's very matte white. Let it cool down. Take it out. Hand polish it with a rag, and at that point, when it turns to a glossy finish, all the parts that are going to be white. You cannot touch anything, no matter how many times you wash your hands, because you always have grease in our hands, and it always comes out, right? And if you happen to touch a piece that is white, you won't. Until after the firing, we fire one time as the last process, and that piece of white that you wanted, if you touch it with your greasy hand, you'll see a little a smudge mark on it. And so a lot of people don't like that. I'm just happy that it survives the firing, because to get it to that point, it's about maybe 2 months worth of work, a month and a half. But it's funny to have all my nieces and nephews around when they know they're not supposed to touch it at this point, but if I make them a pizza or a sandwich or something, when I fire it, I see a tiny little fingerprint sticking on. I'm like, ah. It's like, okay, but but at the same time, they're learning, right? So I don't mind it at all. It's their signature. So, so when we fire it, we cover it with chicken wire, leave like about 5 inches around the whole piece, and that's just a protection to hold up the cow manure on it. So the cow manure has to be, again, dried for a whole year. My sisters, it's funny when they go collect it because they'll be screaming. There's a lot of centipedes around. But we collect it, let it dry, so once they stay intact, then you kind of build like an igloo around on the chicken wire. So once it's covered like that, then we add the wood around it, ignite it, and I have to have 2 people to do that because we have to ignite it at the same time on all sides so that the fire burns evenly from the bottom upward, and it brings the smoke straight up, and we're just trying not to let any of the smoke touch the piece. So it burns and it goes straight up. At a certain point, you realize that the actual cow manure starts to ignite and it's burning itself as the fuel. So we stop adding the wood fuel to it, and we just let the fire go. And you can't get close to it at all, so you're just praying not to hear any like thuds or pops, because you can't see it at all. So once it burns, it cools down itself, and then like the cow manure with the chicken wire still intact, and you could pick it up really slowly, and when you set it down, it just all shakes and falls down. And there you have your piece, seeing if it survived or not. So from that point, the piece, you have to polish it again, rag polish it, and takes off all the ashes off of it. And then I usually use animal fat or either egg white to kind of what lotion does to our skin to bring out the color and just kind of seal it, make its own patina, right? So that's then you call the Balzers and deliver their piece after it's done. It's good to see you guys. So it's a long process, and I want you guys to understand like what it takes to work with traditional methods and materials. But you'll see also how I've also branched out into when I do a lot of the main part of like eight months out of the year, I'm traveling doing universities and workshops and residencies and stuff like that, and I'm able, all my traditional work stays at home in Cochiti where it's supposed to stay. I create there, but then when I travel and across seas, whatever, then I'm able to use the high fire clay because they have all their kilns at each university or wherever I'm working at. So I've been learning how to do different atmospheric firing from wood fire, anagamo firing, soda fire, raku, all different types of it. So it's just interesting to really get that type of education, working with students, and they inspire me as much as back and forth how we do it. So, okay, I think we could, there's the next slide. That's how it looks when it comes out of the ground. So it does look like it's really like chocolate, right? So here's a video and showing you guys exactly how long, and all condensed into like 5 minutes, a whole year. That was just for a small batch too. Next slide. So this is after it's all done. Like I told you guys, that's how we fire it. So it looks like one of my nephews is tired laying in the back of the truck. Next slide. When it's like starting to get fully engulfed. Also, we during the winter times, my nephew Kyle is a metalsmith, so he built us some barrels that we could use. So if we don't have any of the the dried cow manure or the dried wood, then I'll use the barrels to fire it in. Next one, sample of the storytellers, and our people made it using grandmothers, grandfathers, or either animals. So that's a sample of it. Next one, sample of when I was 6 years old. I made the little tiny one with a red hat on. It's kind of predicting the future, I guess, because you can't tell if it's a man or a woman, a bow tie, but has breasts. I don't know if that was a prediction of the future. I don't know. So my mom's drummer, my dad made the drum, our grandmother's storyteller next to it, and some of the other pieces when I really started to experiment of how to use the pot as a canvas. So I started bringing in different types of tattoo work and black line tattoo, right? Sample of some of the bears that I made when I was in my teenage years. Next slide is one of the biggest pots that I've done, which is on the cover of the Revolution book that Charles King and I had just released. So that was, that size is just really hard to do, and it's very intimidating, but I try to push my family to go as big as we can because we'll never know if we'll be successful or not if we don't try it. Next slide. So again, going back to it, knowing it was a dying art form, Robert Gallegos had showed me this picture by Ben Whittick. So he went around and he documented all the pieces that were being made in the Pueblo pottery. So that was an example of all the different conjoined twins and all the circus performers and opera performers. And I, again, wanted to revive it and giving voice back to the clay that was being forced to stop or either destroyed. And when I had seen this photograph at Bob's house, it was always in my head. And I had done a show out in Prague, and I had seen the Charles Bridge, and it looked exactly like the canvas backdrop in this original photograph. So I started snapping pictures the same angle, and I knew that I was going to recreate this photograph and ask my family members to pick a piece in there, study it, and try to revive not only the size, but just exactly what our people did back in the day. So there's 23 pieces, and the next slide, and there's an example of how it turned out. So evidently, this whole group was displayed here at the MIAC first. And it was pretty cool that it stayed here for a while, and we kept it together as a group because I wanted it just to match the photograph. And Cartier from Paris, they had I can't remember, the Foundation Cartier had called, and they asked if we had all the pieces together. Yes, and now they all reside permanently at the Cartier in Paris. So that whole journey working with my family to do that was very awesome to do. Next one. And a lot of the pieces, this is an ongoing series called Taboo, and it's all about commenting, social commentary of hard to talk about subjects. So it's always the next hot topic that comes along, whether it be politics or our parents and one of our sisters both passed because of cancer. So if you have a piece of artwork talking about this subject, it's a lot easier to make a conversation about it. So this is what I used this series to talk about. So next slide. So here's a sample of politics, right? So this is one pot in different angles, and I had made this when before the inauguration happened, and commenting when the Dakota Access Pipeline was going on. I depicted the pipelines with a black snake, the politician riding with bundles of cash in his hand, but the snake's coming to bite him in the back. The middle one is all the fracking that goes on, and slowly the snakes have infiltrated the politician's body, eating him from the inside out. And the last one was my prediction of the women's march that happened. So all the hands raised in protest, and everybody that wanted to rise up, I wanted to have this and give the opportunity of the women that will be they're honored to remove this politician. Next one. This one is called This one is called Cyberbully. He's tweeting on the can at 5 a.m. So it was just another comment on the social scene, so the political scene. The next one is called Strength, and I made this because our dad would hate to go in the MRI machine. And like the second from this side here, this one, if you were to lay the piece down on its back, that resembles him going into the machine. So the design is called a V-maze design, and it stands for the never-ending quest to find a cure for cancer, a maze. So that's represented our dad, our mom, and our sister. And I had first released this at King Galleries in Scottsdale. And this group of like 15 women had came in, and they were huddled around it and discussing it. And then they invited me over to talk with them, and they had told me that their stories, because they're all survivors of cancer. So it connected us immediately, and we shared all our stories. And it was just, again, it's like having a piece of art to discuss, and brings us closer together. I mean, we are closer than we are apart. Next one. This one speaks up for the LGBTQ community, and commenting, working in the classic iconic picture of Wewa from Cochiti Pueblo that was taken in the 1800s in DC. So I wanted to incorporate him with a bunch of 80s iconic musicians, such as Dead or Alive, RuPaul, Boy George, Grace Jones. And I had the privilege of meeting all of them, so I wanted to put them on the same pot and just reminding people that we have to hold them in higher regards as we used to. Next one. This one is also about the community, and it's called Hate is a Drag. So these are all drag queens, doing their thing. Next one is was influenced by the nighttime scene. A lot of people think I do this for shock value, but it's not. It's just like, if you see the pieces from the 1800s, there's samples of like prostitution that went on. A lot of the comments were written in Spanish, but there's a lot more explicit stuff and way more. Mine looks very tame compared to our ancestors. I know you guys know all of these pieces, right? So, but yeah, it's not done for shock value. It's just to record a time in history of what we've seen in the clubs. Next time. That one is me on the left. Just kidding. And then it slowly started to really get into incorporating fashion into the design. So you can see like how I started to really mix my photography, my friends, my models. Some of them are my family or just friends, and really letting the models and fashion inspire the clay works and vice versa. Next one. More commenting about the leather and S&M nightclub scene. Next one. And then I was able to work with Donna Karen. So I had designed all of the graphics that would go on her 2003 spring line. So that's a sample of it, and then on the left-hand side, but then on the right-hand side, I really learned a lot from working with her and how to manufacture my own line of garments, whether it be in leather and silk, handbags, furniture, all that. Next one, sample of really taking advantage of how to tell the story of the revolt and slowly do the costuming and also video and film and Photoshop. Next one. Then you can see the V-maze design, how it transferred onto, say, maxi skirts like this. And then when the pandemic hit, we started manufacturing some of the masks as well. Next one. When I was young and hot. Time flies. Damn, curses. But it was just funny because when we had shot the Donna Karen campaign ad, this is a funny story, because we had to take the pottery pieces out to Palm Springs, yes. And Donna Karen didn't tell me where it was going to be at. She goes, oh, just go and check into the hotel, bring the pieces, and we'll tell you where the address is. And it was funny because like at that time, Joanne and Bob and I would always communicate on the phone, and because she was like, tell me what Donna Karen's doing. And at one time when I was hanging out with her in her New York apartment, I was in the restroom, I was all excited. I was like, Joanne, I'm in her bathroom. This is what I see. And it was just funny. But anyway, she told us where to go for the photo shoot. One of my friends had started taking in the pottery into this house, tons of like catering trucks and just like a big scene that they're shooting the ad campaign. He came back out and he was like, you're not going to believe who's the head model. And it turned out to be Mila Jovovich, like one of the first supermodel that wore some of my clothes, like Lilu from The Fifth Element. I know, Pilar, I seen you back there. One of our favorite characters, right? So, I mean, not you, character Pilar, but well, maybe, like Lilu. So, yeah, I almost passed out when I seen her wearing this stuff. It was kind of cool, but the house, we had to put on like booties on our shoes, and it turned out to be Frank Sinatra's house. What? That was insane. Next one. So it turned out to started once we released the line, then all the fashion magazines hit, and then we did home decor as well. So there's duvet covers, pillows next. Then it spread onto hospitality design. So I worked with a company called Project Dynamics out of Las Vegas. So they challenged me to design what I would see in a high-end hotel, if I were to say in a suite, from down to the carpet, the wallpaper, the duvet covers, the bed, the headdress, the headboard, the desk, the lighting, everything. So this was what turned out. The next one. So challenge accepted, yes. So, at this point now, like I don't, like all the different types of mediums that I do work in, it's like out of necessity, and it just kind of lends itself well, and it always lets me tell the people or whoever I'm working with, whether it be Donna Karen fashionistas, to educate them about where the designs came from. And I'm so thankful for Donna Karen for letting me do that, because a lot of people, the up-and-coming designers now, are always being ripped off and plagiarized from non-indigenous designs, but being influenced by native design work. So every time I give lectures to students, up-and-coming designers, I always make sure to let them know like how important it is to take care of their intellectual property, to get trademarks, copyrights, registered marks. Like my Made in Native America label, we've had that since probably about 2004. And we had to go through a lot of processes, getting it through the trademark, through the copyright, then finally registered mark. So there's a lot of people that do try to plagiarize that, but if you go through the right sources, playing the right game of protecting through lawyers, protecting intellectual property right, then you stand a fighting chance if anybody tries to rip you off. So that's very important for all the artists, or in general, to protect everybody's intellectual property. Next. Then it went down to Tamarin down at UNM. So I learned how to do lithographs. So these guys are available down at Chaco Hotel down in Albuquerque. I did a series of three lithographs, and they're pretty big. They're bigger than you think. So I had fun to do that. And again, just trying different ways to work with different mediums. Next one, along came glass out of Corning Museum. So these are examples of combining ceramics with the glass work. Next one. And like clearly Indigenous have some of these pieces installed here. If you guys been through this exhibition here, it's pretty awesome to see how many Indigenous glass blowers they are. Next one. This one's at the Rockwell Museum, and it's a comment of like all the different types of dances that we do at the Pueblo, the deer dances, ram, elk. So that's a comment on that. The next one. So with all this tying together, I was like, man, how do I educate the world about the Pueblo Revolt and how I could make an impact of telling this story. And I see Rachel Agoyo back there, and her husband, Herman Agoyo, the late Herman Agoyo, and my manager, Tish Agoyo. He was a leader of telling the story, educating the world about the Pueblo Revolt. And we hung around him a lot, so we're showing him like how we're going to tell the story and make a continuation of his work, of what he is doing. And we got his stamp of approval, so he liked how we're doing it, reaching out to the next generation. So that's very important, and he gave us his blessing. So that's what we dedicated our team to do, to using our artwork. Next one. So it's like, okay, a feature film, duh. Next one. So now that you see, go ahead and play it. So creating all the characters, you can't go to Party City and buy any of these outfits, so you got to make them yourself. So going through body painting with my friends and family members, we do that at the Pueblo. And once they're all ready, we put up like mattresses, jump around the studio, and try to get that shot for photography. Next one. So now that you see how we do a lot of the costuming, and then I get them into the studio, into Photoshop, do all the photography, and then like on the right, left-hand side, then you see more of how it all comes together. Next one. Get them, and then start making them very movie-like and trying to really, again, like every exhibition that I do, I have to submit to our intellectual property lawyers to do it as seasons or as collections, so that it just keeps building on itself. And when I do exhibitions at like such as this venue or other museums, they'll do like a catalog, so it helps me in a way to record a timeline and to give to our lawyers as stamps of how we're creating it. Next one. Venetian soldiers, you guys seen this before? Their storyline is like in the future, their Pueblo got bombed first, so that's why they're wearing all the breathing tubes and also the oxygen tanks around their necks. And it just shows again like how the models influence the clay works or vice versa. Next one. Then I started putting all the characters onto the pots. So now you see exactly how it's all tying together and how they work together. Next one. One of my friends that I painted as the translator character and then put it onto the pot. Next. Taboo is the lead character of my whole series, and she's the right-wing woman to Pope, the leader of the Pueblo Revolt. So I wanted to talk about women empowerment, and her storyline is she's the leader of the blind archers. So when she was a kid, a whole group of kids were practicing archery with their grandparents, their grandmothers. They're already really good as kids, but when the invaders got here, they challenged them to archery contest. And the little kids kicked their butts. In turn, they got really pissed off and blinded all these groups of kids. So there was many battles before the 1680, the big one. But when 1680 came around, all these kids stand up and they're of age. So Taboo is the leader of the blind archers, and they're still ace archers, and even though they're blind, so that's their superhero power. Next one. Again, women empowerment. How it transfers onto the pot. That's Taboo. So that's why it explains. You see all of my characters that are wearing blindfolds. That's who it is, the blind archers. Next one. And just playing around with more of the costuming and prop making. Next one. And like going to YouTube University. Like I didn't know how to work with foam or metal, so you can learn anything on YouTube. So that's me creating some of the masks and helmets for the aeronaut characters. Next one. That's how it turned out. One of them was a professor at Colorado College. Well, I was there for 8 months, and the other two were students. So I try to incorporate as many people as I can when we do photo shoots. Next one. And then there's more professors on the top left side, and then Nona Hendricks. You guys know her from Kitschy Kitschy, yeah, 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 yeah. That song. So she was my friend, and she asked me to. She wanted to be one of these aeronaut characters, so I designed, and she was going to be on a float at the Kennedy Center when they opened their new wing. And it just happened that I was going to be there too doing a lecture, so I said, okay, I'm going to be there, I'll bring the outfit. So we became friends, and we started costuming her for her different performances. So this is how it turned out, and then from after that, we took that show to the Met in New York. Next one. Example of the Rights Ranch when I was there during the pandemic. I was teaching at ASU when it hit. So then I didn't know if I should come back home or if we would just stay there, because at that point none of us knew what was going to happen. So we went up to the Rights Ranch, and the owners already had closed it down, and it was closed to the public and to the members. So we went up there, and she had asked us. She goes like, if it's only two. I took one student with me. And we had been in quarantine already, so she said, if you guys want to do this, like you're welcome to stay here and just take care of the studio. So Don writes, I had no idea about the wood firing with the anagama, so that was my chance to learn that. So again, when I went in there, he passed in 2017, I believe, but I introduced myself and asked for guidance when I went in there, and then because being raised doing the Cochiti stuff, like it's all smooth and you have to paint the fine details on it. This is like relies on the carving and just the texture of the clay because the wood does its own thing. So this is some examples of what came from that. Next one. Some of the chargers shields that go with the characters, and the heavy carving that I really started to learn how to carve on the pieces. Next one is a sample of raku firing. Grayson Farrer was the resident artist there, so he would teach classes, and he was there just keeping the grounds together, and he taught me how to do a collaboration with raku. And I know it blew my mind because I didn't know they throw a hot piece of clay into water. I was like, what the hell's going on? But yeah, it was awesome to learn the different processes. Next. And then I started doing a lot of collaborations, like with, I'm sure you guys know Elias Jade Not Afraid. He's a beader. He's known for his beadwork. So these are some of the characters that I'll be releasing this summer. There's probably 5 venues here in Santa Fe. So the Recon Watchmen are here to collect information, and all of the beadwork that is in there represent microchips. So they collect all the, and also with the aeronaut characters, they're here to collect like shards, designs, pottery, our songs, our prayers, our ceremonial dances, take them back to 2180, store them, protect them so that when we get there, everything is still intact. So it's kind of my way of doing prayers, but using different characters. So you'll see these types of characters coming out for all the different venues here. My first outdoor sculpture was still, it's installed over at the Inn of Loretto. So I didn't know how that was going to turn out using a clay bust of Popeye. Because I never done outside work before, and it's high fired, so I was just crossing my fingers that it could survive like any hail or rain or snow. He's still there, so I'm very thankful. Next one, some more high fire work and collaborations that we did up at Archie Bray up at it's like a clay heaven up there up in Helena, Montana. I had no idea, but I got invited to do a residency, so these are some of the samples that came out. Next one. Some of the barware that you'll be seeing around town. So there's shot glasses, on the rocks glasses, margarita glasses, plates, and all that. So be sure to check that out when it comes. I'll have some during the Memorial Day weekend show. Next one. So I had a chance to meet Jun Kaneko. Do you guys know who he is? So with him, making pieces that are over 15 feet tall, ceramics. Like, I want to get some of my characters to be that tall, just to have a piece like in a museum or a gallery show, to have that character stare right at you or be the same size as you is like so powerful. So he shared with me all of his secrets, and also I said, okay, and when I go do a residency at the Archie Bray, I'm going to go for it really big. Next one. So there we go. We started doing really big pieces. I invited my friend, one of my best friends, Justin Reese. He helped me. He's like 6'4", so I knew he would be good to help me reach from the top, because like these heads will be installed at the Vladam this summer, and they're pretty big. So you need somebody big to really help push the inside out. Next one. So these are some of the really detailed pictures of like when I started to really carve and to develop these characters, the Watchmen. Next one. And you see how big the pots are coming out, and how we have access and resources to all of their Blau kilns. And so we're there for 2 months, so we did as much as we could. Next one. So yeah, there goes his long arms into the top of the head. Next one. It's just funny to see these, to remember it, because we work like 17-hour days. We're so excited, and they house us right on the premises. So we just walk outside say next to the restaurant out there. It was that close, so we could just roll back into the studio, go back out and shower and sleep. But it was an awesome time. Next one. These are some of them, how they started to turn out, like with all the different types of the new colors, because I never was used to working with colors, because of black, white, and red are Cochiti traditional colors. But now I get a chance to work with turquoise and reds and metallics and really blend it to the storytelling. Next one. So all of these recon characters come with a shield, and these are pieces that you will see at the Vladam as well. So everything here at the MIAC is all traditional work, and I'll have some traditional pieces for the Memorial Day weekend. But then as we move into summer, more pieces will be released of these ones, and you could just like look at the virgilortiz.com and to just see where everything's going to start coming out. But these are some examples of, I worked with Simon Levin. He's a wood firer, so he was helping me make the shills. So it's pretty, the work that's going to come out is hopefully make you guys think again of what we're doing. Next one. And the size of them too. I just wanted to go as big as I could. So now to get into like sculptures and to monumental kind of styles, we just pushed it as hard as we could. So these are some of the pieces that will come out. And out of like Justin and I being there with our directors and really bringing like, there was like 7 other resident artists that were in a bubble while we're there. And we're just like, that, again, it was during the pandemic. So we were just in the studios working, and they seen how Justin and I brought those residents together and made a little family. So they host a podcast through the Brickyard Network of Archivre. So the next slide is they gave us our own podcast, and it's called The Shot Callers. So we'll release a podcast every Tuesdays, and I think the first one will start tomorrow. So then it'll just be spread out, and we're interviewing different people like my manager Tisha Goyo, Charles King was one episode. So I wanted to share with everybody of how I'm able to work with a management team and also galleries, and how to really communicate and not to be afraid to state what you want to do and how you want to install your pieces, so that all the artists kind of learn from that and share my experience. Next one. And then of course the book, you guys know about that. So super excited to do that. I have one more. If you guys want to see a preview of what's coming into summer, I can play it. And then I'm done. Okay, go for it. There we go.
So thank you, everybody, and thank you, Virgil, for that. It's
You're
always
welcome.
such a joy to hear you talk about your work in that way. I have a million questions, but I will let you ask your questions. I can't really see too well, but if anybody has some questions, can you raise your hand?
In the making of the pots and stuff, you showed us all the materials, but you didn't show us painting, the actual painting. Do you put lines on before, or is it all freehand?
It's all freehand, because like comparing the traditional work with the high fire stuff, the high fire stuff you have to bisque it, so it goes through like 2 or more firings. If you bisque it, you can write on it with a magic marker, do the design work, and then fire it, and it fires off. Or either just wipe off the whole thing, erase it. But when you work with traditional work, you can't touch it, like even like with your fingertips, right? So to get the different types of characters, like their face proportions, right, I'll use a piece of tracing paper and draw the graphic on the paper first, and then hold it close to the piece and do little pinholes to mark like the pupil, the ear, the chin. So I just do little guidelines like that, and I kind of connect the dots. Yeah. But also when you paint with the wild spinach, once it goes down, you can't erase it. It's there, so you get one chance at it. And if you try to fill in a bigger piece that is like more black in the design, you have to. Sometimes it comes out like transparent, or what's that word? Like it's a slight green or brown tint to whatever the wild spinach turns out. So you have to be really careful about going over and over, because it'll do the opposite and start peeling off and like do streaking. So yeah, that's why we're readers now.
Yes.
I'm curious about the larger pieces that you've been creating, and so do you let them dry at a certain point and then work on another piece and then come back to it?
Yeah, we usually let the bigger pieces dry for like almost a year. So just because like it has to make something that big, the walls have to be thicker. So I learned how to work with slab making now, kind of like adobes or bricks, right? So that helps you build quicker. And I learned that from Jun Kaneko. So you have to do inner structures to do like carry the weight of the head. If it has shoulders, you have to do inner structures like a building. But having clay on the inside of the body, that means you have to let it dry longer.
Could you talk a little more about the piece that's on the book?
These guys?
Yeah, and also
Yeah, well, I just wanted that there because like a lot of the designs were from our family designs. So each family does have some signature design elements, but I also try to develop my own interpretations of it, like the wild spinach, right? So all the different types of materials that we use, I have a design for it. A lot of them speak to the traditional houses where we have our ceremonial dances, like the kiva houses, the round houses, the steps on the outsides, the step ladders. So there's so much, every design has a story behind it. And then like the dances that we pray for rain or ask for rain or our crops and harvest and all that. So it's all incorporated as prayers into it. So each different design, like from different families or different artists, all have their own representations.
Can you talk a little bit more about the context where that piece is in and the photo shoot and all of that?
Yeah, we shot this down at White Sands because I knew I was going to give the aeronaut characters, I wanted that to be their kind of background because they're all completely black, right? So I wanted to have a high contrast to shoot them in. So we went down there, and to get a photo where you don't have any handprints or footmarks in it, that means you have to carry a big pot and reach like as far as you can go over. You're like shaking and set it down and then go back and then take the picture. But it just worked out really well again with the super white ground and the blue skies. Yeah, so
you mentioned the trademark aspect of your work, and I was just wondering, so do you register each body of work then?
yeah, because like every show that I do, I try to, a bigger exhibition, I try to release a new character. I've designed 19 groups of characters that represent the 19 pueblos that are left here today. So that's why like you just have to protect yourself at all costs because like the people will plagiarize you. And if you don't know how to play that game legally, then it's like you're SOL, you put it that way. But you just have to do it no matter what. Like if you go into any kind of business, your logos, your trademark slogans, whatever, you should, if you want to invest all your time and that's what your life is about, make sure you protect your intellectual property.
When will we learn more about the 2180s that were involved?
If you were to, it's good to see you guys. It's all coming together just because of like all the different shows that we've been doing. Like with Charles Gallery, we used to do little pamphlets, right, for each show. So if you're able to collect those, it kind of puts together the whole storyline, the whole script. And now it just keeps growing. The more people that I meet, the more doors that open in the movie industry because I never went to school for anything, higher education besides high school. So now that all of this I'm learning from the ground up, my team and I, it's just keeps, more things just keep turning, rumbling, and growing. So who knows, it could, more stuff could drop immediately or take a couple years. But it's just part of documenting everything and developing it as fully as I can, all the characters, like how they look, where they come from, how they speak, their costuming, just because when and if we do work with a huge company, I don't want to lose the integrity of how I design them and what they're supposed to look like. So I try to document it as far and develop them as finished as I can. And that's Kathy from the New Mexico History Museum. So we'll be doing an installation over there too that opens right before Indian Market, right?
Yeah.
So it's the centennial for the Swaya Indian Market show. So you guys stay tuned for that as well.
And that opens on the 7th of August, right? Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about, in addition to native treasures and Gladym, what are you planning for Indian Market? And then what's for 2023 and 2024?
There's a lot that's going on. Like there's like 6 venues here in Santa Fe from this through September. So yeah, like it starts off with 2 days, like the kickoff, and I thank everybody for coming. It's exciting, right? And then the native treasures at the end of the month, and then it goes then I have to go teach out in Aspen at Anderson Ranch. So it'll be teaching ceramics again. I came back. I don't know if we're going to do anything for our feast day yet because the Pueblos are all still closed. I don't know if that's going to happen, but then I also go back out to Wisconsin, do another anagama firing, wood fire, get back, and then the whole time we're installing at the History Museum that opens at the beginning of August. Then of course Indian Market happens. We'll have a show then as well. And how we operated last time during the COVID times, like we had a condo where we had booked anybody that wanted to see and visit the showroom, 30 minutes intervals, and we had all the 2 balconies open, so all the airflow was right. So, and I was able to spend time one-on-one with everybody that had questions, and we'll do that again this year. And then the Vladum opens, so that's the brand new Vladum that's going to open at the rail yard district. So it's a group show, but I will have 3D mapping projection. All of the large high-fire, very colorful Recon Watchmen will be released there. After that, where's Tish? I don't. Yeah. And then, this hasn't been released yet, but I think we're safe to say it. Then Meow Wolf will open too. So I'm working with them. Yeah. So it's a lot going on, but we're just trying to. Thank God we have the team that we do have, and they're helping me pull all of this off together. It's exciting.
Yeah. So I think that's a great place to wrap up. I do have one last question for you. One of the things that I admire so much about you is it seems like you can never learn enough, and you are never scared to learn something new or a new technique or a new medium. And so I know that's influenced by the way you grew up and the family that you grew up in. So I've been honestly meaning to ask you this for a while, so I'm just going to ask you now what your earliest memory of art was.
It was always just, again, waking up, I would love the smell of when our mother was mixing the clay, just because it's like when you get our first rainstorm, right? You smell that smell, but it's even more intense when you're just in there. You don't think twice about it, but when you reminisce of how far you can go back, you're like, oh, this is what I was smelling. I remember when you first start boiling the spinach, it smells really good because you could eat it when it's very young, but when it gets older, it's bitter. But then you're like, oh, this smells so good. But after the 5th day, you're like, oh, no more. But I think it's just, all a part of that. But going back to learning this, I try to teach the students, once you tell yourself that you've learned everything you can in that field, you're cutting yourself off because, I'll never learn. I'll never stop learning. I tell them to aim as high as you can and never stop creating and just try everything. Don't be afraid of failing because failures are our best lessons, our best teachers. So the more you fail, the quicker you can learn and figure out what you're doing. So just don't ever, and also don't put up imaginary hurdles. Yep. And the students are all, what are you talking about imaginary hurdles? But it's those hurdles were never there to begin with. It's like self-doubt, so don't ever put up imaginary hurdles.
Yep. There you go.